I wanted to just take the opportunity to ask people to beg people to come forward. Somebody knows something.
We have more updates in the Nancy Guthrie case. First, more information about this second note, presumably saying that Nancy Guthrie is dead. There's also questions about the cryptocurrency and the Bitcoin, and a former FBI agent has come out and said the authorities may be close to capturing the porch guy. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. There are cases that stick with you, cases that you really can't shake, you can't stop thinking about. And I will tell you, for the last 5 months, this has been one of them. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, mother of Today Show anchor Savannah Guthrie, vanished from her home in the Catalina Foothills outside Tucson, Arizona, back on February 1st. Here's what we know. She was taken against her will. The Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI have been clear about that. This was not a wandering off. This was not a medical episode. This was an alleged abduction. You've seen the footage, the masked man, the doorbell camera, the gun, the flashlight in the mouth, the way he seemingly tried to cover the lens with flowers or this foliage from her own garden. It's chilling. It's unsettling. It's been burned into our brains for months now. But here's the question that's come up. And I'm going to get into it later with someone who's going to help us find the answer, who, really, I think an excellent expert on this. Is the FBI any closer to closing in on this person or persons? Because according to a former FBI agent who spoke this week, they might be. So we'll get more on that in a bit. Here's the thing. For all that footage, for all the attention, for all the reward money, $100,000 from the FBI, another $1 million from the family, we still don't have answers. We don't have suspects. We don't have arrests. We don't have Nancy. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know if there's a person of interest or suspects, but as of right now, we're not seeing anything. And then what happened this week? We got something new, something changing how we're looking at things here. But before we even get to that, I just got to take you back super quick. Timeline matters here, especially what investigators say happened in that first 24 hours. So according to the Pima County Sheriff's Office, Nancy was last seen the night of January 31st. She had dinner at her daughter Annie's house. Her son-in-law drove her home, dropped her off at around 9:48 p.m., saw her go inside, garage door went down at 9:50. Next day, February 1st, a friend calls. Nancy didn't show up for church. They go to the house, back doors are open, blood on the front steps. DNA later confirms it's Nancy's blood. She's nowhere to be found. Just days later, the notes start arriving, right? Media outlets in Tucson began receiving these messages just days after Nancy vanished. According to CBS News and multiple investigators that were familiar with the case, the first note, sent on February 2nd, demanded millions of dollars in Bitcoin for Nancy's safe return. And what made investigators take it seriously was the level of detail it contained. As FBI Special Agent in Charge Heath Janke confirmed at a press conference, quote, one talked about an Apple Watch and one talked about a floodlight in Nancy Guthrie's home. So those specifics led authorities to believe the communication might be legitimate. Only someone who would have taken her would know those details, right? And here's a detail I want to come back to later. When law enforcement got that Bitcoin wallet address, they had a decision to make. Do they pay it? Do they pay the money? Do they track the money? What they actually did, what happened next, it's one of the more revealing parts of this investigation. We're going to get into that. But Savannah and her siblings responded directly to the kidnappers. On February 7th, they posted a video on Instagram in which Savannah addressed whoever was holding their mother, begging for her return so they could celebrate with her, offering to pay. And then came a second note. This is the big one. According to CBS News, it was sent on February 6th, reportedly arrived from the same IP address as the first, leading investigators to believe that the same person or people were behind both communications. But this message said something different, and it was devastating. Multiple sources, including CNN and NBC News, report that the second note claimed Nancy had died. According to sources who reviewed the note, it indicated that her death was not intentional, that she died shortly after being taken, and the note also reportedly said she was, quote, buried in nature. You know, I believe it might have been Airmail who broke that news first, but NBC News was on top of that from the beginning, the second note's contents. And what happened on the Today Show yesterday? After that report, Savannah spoke directly to the camera. She was sitting at the Today Show desk, surrounded by her colleagues. She was crying, and she begged anyone who knows anything to come forward.
But I can't pretend I'm not here. And so since I am, I wanted to just take the opportunity to ask people to beg people to come forward. Somebody knows something. And this is a news story today that is on your radar, but this is the life that my sister lives, that I live, that my brother lives, that our extended families live, that our children live every day. And we are in agony. And we cannot be at peace.
But here's where it gets strange, because different outlets are describing that second note differently. CNN, CBS say it contained an apology. One source saying it included the phrase, "We are truly sorry." But NBC, citing 3 people that are familiar with the matter, says the note had no apology at all, made no request for payment in exchange for her body. And TMZ founder Harvey Levin has publicly pushed back, saying the note his outlet received contained no reference to Nancy dying at all. But on the question of whether authorities have confirmed if the notes are real, there's no public official statement from the FBI or the Pima County Sheriff's Department definitively confirming the notes are authentic, as far as we can see at the time of this recording. And that's what I want to dig into. Because if these notes are real, if the same person or people who took Nancy sent them, then we have to start asking hard questions about what they actually tell us. And can they be tracked? Look, let me say something. We cover the dangers in this world all the time on Sidebar. But you know something that really sticks out to me that I think affects a lot of people is being part of a data breach. Yeah, you, your loved ones, the private information, it is constantly at risk of being leaked, which is why I want all of you to keep your data safe online. Here's how it works. Incogni. Incogni tracks down all those old posts and search sites that's exposing your information, and then they demand removal. Look, I was shocked. Turns out databases had my information, and within days, Incogni was taking them down. The setup is super simple. You just create an account. Incogni is going to do the rest. And their unlimited plans custom removals feature lets you submit specific links that their privacy experts will personally investigate and remove. They can't harm you. If they can't find you, use code SIDEBAR at the link below and get 60% off an annual plan. That is incogni.com/sidebar. Okay, so I want to bring on somebody who is an expert in this field. I'm very happy to have him on. Daniel Brunner, former FBI special agent, crisis management expert, FBI SWAT tactical operations team leader, extensive experience in crisis situations. Again, so happy to have you on here, Daniel, to talk about this. So I have a lot of questions. I want to start with the second ransom note, or the second note. Let's just call it that. Now, different outlets are describing it differently, right? Some say there was an apology of some sort. Some say there wasn't. I want to assume for a moment that this version was an apology. If they're apologizing and they're saying that Nancy Guthrie is dead, that she's buried with nature, doesn't that say something about them one way or not? Now, I don't know if they're telling the truth, but doesn't it say something about the sender or senders?
I think it does. I mean, see, I've been reading a lot in the last couple of days. A lot of other FBI agents are coming on and providing their opinions on how, what does it say? What is the traditional, kidnapper? Do they apologize? They don't apologize. And listen, from the beginning, when this incident happened back in February, I was constantly saying this isn't the normal kidnapping. This isn't falling in line. And that's based before that video was released of the doorbell cam. You can see this suspicious individual who is walking around. Holster isn't normally where someone wears a holster. They're walking around not familiar with what they're doing. The blood droplets. I believe this incident was a kidnapping that the individual really didn't think about. I don't think this is a professional kidnapping team. I don't think this is a well thought out operation by the kidnapper. So going in that line, I don't think you can consider the notes, from normal kidnappers to be reliable. And like I said, it's, normal, kidnappers, professional kidnappers don't apologize. Well, we're not dealing with professional kidnappers here. I think we're dealing with amateurs who saw a quick buck, a way to make some money, and they didn't realize who she was, and they didn't realize her health concerns. They didn't realize what the ramifications were. They thought this would be a quick turnaround. So I think that they really didn't think about it. So then when they sent that second note, if it is authentic, if the first and second notes are authentic, let's go down this pathway. If the second note was, I think they genuinely were like, I messed up. I'm sorry, because they're not professionals. They're not professionals. They didn't think about the ramifications.
Let's just think about it from there. Would there be any reason to lie about whether Nancy was alive or not? I mean, look, when I read it, if I take it as true, I wouldn't be surprised because, in a missing persons case, in a kidnapping case, the first few days, the first few hours are so critical, but particularly when you're dealing with an 84-year-old woman that has had health ailments. I'm not surprised if there was a situation where she passed. I mean, there was a question about her not properly having her medication, but would there be any reason to lie about this, if she really were alive and saying
No, I don't.
she died?
I don't think there's a reason to lie. No, I think that they were being genuine. I think that they realized, and this may have been their way of saying, "Hey, I'm sorry it happened." Maybe in their mind, this would like make it go away, make the problem go away, make law enforcement not look for them. So I don't know, what was in the mindset of this kidnapper, because this doesn't fall in the normal kidnapping, realm. We've talked about this. So I think that I think this was their way of trying to get out of trouble.
Well, if they want to get out of trouble, if they feel really bad, why not provide details about the location of her body?
Well, I think at the second, I think that's a great question as to why they haven't to this point. I think the tumbleweed of how quickly this grew in national and international attention. I mean, I did interviews for countries in England, Spain, in South America. People around the world were fascinated with this. I don't think they realized it. Then the fact of, if they provide evidence, they provide clues to law enforcement that may get that law enforcement closer to them. It's just their way of, quickly putting it away, and, quickly burying the body and just pretending like it didn't happen. You have to look at it from the mindset of like, a lot of us have children, and that the children, do something and put it and bury it behind the counter, behind the, you put some garbage, or you picked up, you bag of Oreos and just stash it back there, pretend it didn't happen. The evidence is gone. So I think that may have been one of their mindsets. I think Kash Patel really jeopardized, any possibilities of really, resolving this by releasing that video too soon, because then the individuals who were at that front door saw that everyone knows about the physical evidence now, the backpack, the guns, and that, so they were destroyed. They destroyed, oh my gosh, I got to get rid of this. So I think Kash Patel really jeopardized this investigation with his ineptitude and putting it on.
The other way of looking at it is you release that information to the public. Maybe somebody saw something.
No,
and they would report
no, absolutely not. No.
No. Why not?
Because here's the problem with that. They got that video, and here's why the investigation completely derailed when that video was released. That video was obtained by the FBI and then quickly released. Every FBI agent you'll talk to, every investigator, every analyst will say they want that video and they want to analyze it for days. They want to dissect it. They want to figure out what the backpack was, what the gun was, and not give that clue to the kidnappers and saying, hey, we know about what you were wearing. We know that you were doing this. We know that you were at this front door. The last thing you want to do is letting your criminals know that you're on their tail, because that physical evidence proves incredibly important in trial. So if they were able to determine the backpack, who bought it, where they bought it, but we know for a fact that it was released immediately upon being obtained by the FBI. And I know for a fact that there were numerous FBI employees who wanted to dissect it. As a case agent, I would want that video and just peel it apart, case by case. If you saw the day after that video was released, what happened? They popped the tent up outside the porch. Why? Because they were trying to determine the height of the individual. They were doing analysis. That should have been done days before it was released. That video should have been analyzed by the FBI and before release. Then, once everything is squeezed out of that video and nothing comes of it, then you release it to the public. No,
fair enough.
No harm, no foul.
I mean, you're talking to the guy who believes even if there was an arrest in this case, there'd be ample room for a defense attorney to really attack the evidence. I mean, potential contamination of the crime scene is a key factor. But I just want to go back for a second to the note. How have authorities been able to potentially authenticate the note, or say, we believe it's the same person that sent the first note, right? The first note that had the ransom demand, that had key details about the Apple Watch, about the house, remember the backlight. It would seem to suggest the details in there would be only known by somebody who committed or allegedly committed the crime. How are they authenticating those notes? And let me give you a second question here. Is there a way to track the sender? I know there's a lot of conversation about the same IP address, the same computer, proxy servers. So how do they authenticate both, say these are legitimate from the same people, and how do they track down who sent it?
Excuse me. Absolutely. Those are all great questions. And that's the investigation team is able to look at that. The IP address. Are they using a virtual private network, a VPN, to hide where the email is coming from? These are all things that I am sure the FBI analysis team, the CART team, they analyzed every single digital piece of evidence. And we know that they submitted $157 worth of crypto to the said account to see if there would be a withdrawal, and then that would provide additional.
The 152 of Bitcoin, right?
Like excuse me, 152 of Bitcoin. Sorry. Yes, 152 of Bitcoin to the account to see who would withdraw it, and then that would create more bread trails. That would create more, more clues. And in what we would do is tickle the wire, is creating a situation where, okay, now the individuals, the suspects are coming on to it. So yes, every single piece of it, the behavioral analysis unit at Quantico, the experts at thinking and getting into the mind of these criminals, I am sure they looked at it and see it is the same language, the same rhythm, same, gestures, the same, method of writing. Everything changes, like I said, from one to the second. What they're saying is the different language, the different tone. So every single piece of evidence from the moment it's brought in, why did it go to TMZ and why did it go to a local station? Those are all analyzed. And the analysis team at the FBI, some of the best in the world. You got some of these guys who've been doing this for their entire life. They're going to find it. If there is a possibility of a clue, of a thread, they're going to go down this. So I am sure that every single thread was pulled on to figure out the origin of these emails and the communication. Why was it an email? Well, let's go to those servers. Let's go to the servers. Was it Gmail? Okay, let's serve a search warrant on Gmail. Let's look at that account. Who opened the account? When was it opened? What was the IP address that opened the account? Every single piece is not just looking at the email and who was the sender, but let's look at the account. Who opened the account? When was it open? At what point? Where was the IP for serving? And how many access times was it accessed? How many times did they log it? They looked at everything. So I am sure that everything was dissected.
Going back to something that you mentioned, law enforcement had this decision to make, right? Like, what do they do with with this wallet? So, according to the New York Post, the FBI deposited $152 worth of Bitcoin into that wallet. There was a $4 million request for crypto. They put in 152. You talked about tickling the wire. Hasn't been touched. It's just sitting there. Why do you think that is? Does that tell you something? And I've seen articles suggesting, was it a mistake to do it this way? Your thoughts?
I think that this right here, the media's attention to the event, attention to everything that happened, I think in my opinion, I think the kidnappers learned about it. So when people started, speculating, okay, they're requesting Bitcoin, then you had Bitcoin experts coming on and saying, well, if you submit it via Bitcoin, then they'll be able to if the withdrawal. Mm-hmm. I think that's possibility. That's something that has to be considered, that they did not withdraw because they didn't realize. They thought it was just, no fingerprints. And then by maybe watching mass media and reading about it, then they learned about it. That's why when you have hostage situations, you don't want mass media, at a bank. So you have a hostage situation. You don't want cameras focusing in on what law enforcement is doing because the bad guys may be looking at it from inside the bank. So this may be the same situation where they were learning on the fly and going, oh my gosh, if I withdraw that Bitcoin, then they're going to be able to trail me. That's a possibility that has to be considered, that's maybe why that they looked at it and saying that, okay, they could lead to me.
By the way, you keep saying they, kidnappers. Do you believe that there's multiple people here? Like, in other words, I've seen this reporting too. Are we to believe that the bumbling guy on the porch is the same person that might have been trying to operate a sophisticated crypto, ransom operation? Do you think multiple people could potentially be involved in this?
Listen, as a case agent for 20 years in New Jersey, I never say, definitively it's one person or it's 10 people. So sure. Yes, I would go down the pathway of saying this is, for me, I would go down the pathway of it's more likely that more than one person was involved. The odds of one person pulling all of this off, it's possible. It is possible. But I think that the lone wolf actor is using, terrorism terms. The lone wolf actor is the less likely option. I don't think this is a crew of 10. I think that this is, two or three persons who got together and said, oh, this is pretty cool. Let's get this. Let's give me a quick payday. But doing I think one person, it's possible, but less likely. 10 people, unlikely, because I think if it was a large crew, then one of those persons would have broken and provided information.
Well, isn't that interesting? Because we know that the notes sent to TMZ were not from necessarily the kidnapper or kidnappers. It was from somebody who had information. And again, I go back to, I've been reading all about this case. There are some who believe that could be somebody who's connected, maybe a partner of some kind, a relative, whatever it may be. And, that was somebody who has information. And I am wondering now, if we're learning a little bit more about the notes and we're learning a little bit more about the motivations, is that something that hasn't been fully explored, that should be explored, whether somebody is going to come forward with information? It's never too late. You hear Savannah Guthrie making this plea on the Today Show. Somebody knows something. Clearly the public may have the answers here. But it does go back to this idea of, didn't it seem like somebody had information and was willing to come forward for the proper
some of the best
incentive?
Yeah, some of the best cases in this country are solved not by going after the main actor, but going after secondary individuals. I captured a fugitive in Mexico. I captured a fugitive in Mexico, not by going after the fugitive, but by going after someone they were communicating with here in the United States. That's how I was able to get the fugitive's location. I know that Whitey Bulger, they didn't capture Whitey Bulger. They didn't look, obviously his name had been out in the, as a 10 most wanted out of Boston, but they went after his female companion. They put her on. That's how they found Whitey Bulger. So going after a secondary target who may have less attention or may be making more mistakes, offering them a reward and saying, hey, listen, we're not going after you, we're going after the main target. So this is a tactic. I'm sure that a lot of the statements that Savannah Guthrie put out, a lot of statements that the Savannah's family members put out, were not directed towards the actor or actors who, coordinated. It was directed towards the secondary people. And then the amount of heat that came onto them is saying, listen, just come forward. The main kidnappers are cold-hearted. They're, we're going down this pathway that they're expert, but they're not going to be the ones. They made the decision to do it. It's the secondary people who got brought in or got roped in. Maybe those people will break and feel a little bit of sympathy and provide that information to Savannah.
Daniel, you mentioned something at the top about how you see colleagues, former colleagues, members of FBI making comments. I got to ask you about this. So former FBI Special Agent Maureen O'Connell went on Megyn Kelly's show, her radio show, and she said, I think they're getting close to the porch guy. And when they get the porch guy, the floodgates shall swing open. Now, citing her own sources, she said she was 75% confident that this haunting figure who has eluded authorities for nearly 5 months would soon be taken into custody. Why would she say that? What information do you think would lead her to believe that? What would closing in actually mean in practice? I mean, it's a great thing to be thinking about, but I'm curious what might be, how she might know that.
Listen, I'm not going to sit here and besmirch, other formers who go on other networks and make statements like that and saying 75% that they're getting closer. She's a retired FBI agent. Okay. She does not have access to the case files. Neither do I. And so I'm sure that if for some reason she is talking to the case team and they're telling her information, that would be very surprising to me, because as an FBI agent, we were hammered. You do not talk to media. As an FBI agent, you have the public relations, you have the OPA, Office of Public Relations, OPR, and you never talk to media. If that information was being given out, I'd be very surprised that a case agent would be so, flippant to be like, oh yeah, no, I'm 75% there. We're almost there. We're getting this. I think this is her theory. I think it could be a theory. Again, these are all my theories, and I don't have direct information. I know how, as a case agent, I worked for 20 years. I don't know her history. I don't know her background. But most agents move up in the chain of command. So she's been away from casework for 10, 15, 20 years. I've been away for 3 years. So I know how it kind of works in the field. again, why she would say that, I don't know. Maybe just to
Fair.
create the, an image that things are getting closer and more attention. She could have access to the case information. I'd be very shocked if a case agent was speaking to somebody from the media.
So one last thing before I let you go. This is something I've wondered, something I've hoped for. I've seen cases before where through genetic genealogy or through investigative work, they have somebody in their sights. There's somebody they suspect. And they start scoping this person out, and they're waiting for them to discard something, a straw, pizza box, whatever it is. They grab it, they send it in for testing, right? Match it up to potential forensic material taken from the scene. It can take some time. Is there a possibility that's happening right now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's been and here's where I go back to derailing the investigation that Kash Patel did. It derailed the conversation, the potential to track down the individual. Someone who's in a position of director or leader or president should never impact the course of something that is being done in the field. FBI director should not be impacting the field investigations. He did by releasing that video. It's not the only time he's impacted investigations. He's not a good director. He impacts the investigations in the field. That's horrible. By doing it through social media. By derailing that, the case team had the possibility, let's find this individual. Let's get close to him. Let's conduct surveillance. The public doesn't need to have the video until it is completely squeezed. They could have determined a location. They could have followed an individual. They could have done surveillance, collected, like you said, DNA evidence. By changing that course, they have now made it more difficult to get close to an individual who is a suspect. It doesn't change the fact that they still could be there, but it's still, yes, getting DNA, conducting physical surveillance, old school, just follow the person, course of life, pattern of life. If there's DNA that the individual left behind, I believe it's probable that there is DNA evidence somewhere there, hopefully, but it is just such a monumental task to find in a house that little bit of evidence. But who's the best? Evidence response team by the FBI, some of the best in the world. They'll find it, and the surveillance team, hopefully, if they close in on this individual, they'll get the DNA.
Hopefully that's what's happening. Daniel Brunner, I really appreciate you coming on. I really enjoyed the conversation. I wanted to talk about this for a while. These are, really significant developments. Had to address them, but thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. See you next time, everybody.